Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. This session will be split into two parts, and we request your participation for the second part, when the floor will be opened up for any questions you have on our presentation, as well as on the wider discussion on the topic of providing an accessible, equitable experience for members of staff with disabilities in the workplace. But before we get to that section, we plan on sharing details of our journey that HSBC has been on recently, which will set the scene and perhaps provide you with some inspiration for the businesses that you represent. But first, a little about us.
Thanks, Ben. So hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Harper. I am a Senior Digital Governance Manager for HSBC. What this means in reality is that I oversee that all of our internal applications not only meet our brand standards, but are also made accessible for our staff with disabilities or who are neurodiverse. So as soon as I joined HSBC, it was made very clear at a product and a strategy level that accessibility was a key requirement for our digital teams. I worked within a business line dealing and delivering customer-facing applications for many years, which after a couple of years, I moved over into our group brand team, which is where we now govern all of our internal applications to ensure that they meet all of our accessibility standards.
Thank you. And I'm Ben Tillyer, and I'm employed as a technical lead responsible for the accessibility of all of our internal staff systems. Not only just to efficiency, my main goal is to ensure that all staff, be that through facilitating audits, research, by shaping standards, or simply by being there and evangelizing about the importance of accessibility. Outside of HSBC, I'm a certified professional in web accessibility, as well as being an invited expert at the W3C's Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, where the next generation of accessibility standards are currently being debated and written.
Thank you. Okay, so our journey at HSBC. So HSBC have a very clear vision to be the world's most digitally accessible bank. We want to be the bank of choice for our disabled and neurodiverse customers and the employer of choice for our disabled and neurodiverse staff. So our journey has been long-standing and it hasn't always been easy. So we've faced challenges trying to get where we are today, as I'm sure a lot of you here also on this session have also faced. So our accessibility program started in 2014. As I mentioned, that was focusing on customer-facing applications and experiences, with the goal, as I said, to be the bank of choice for customers with disabilities. This year, our host AbilityNet completed a benchmarking exercise which proved that HSBC had the most accessible public website in 11 of our top 13 markets, which we're extremely proud of, which then encouraged us to extend our program even further. So from 2022, our focus is to provide the same level of accessibility to our colleagues with disabilities as we do to our customers with disabilities. As I mentioned before, our goal for the staff program is to become the employer of choice for disabled people and neurodiverse employees. Just a small stat here, right? So HSBC has around 250,000 employees. According to the charity Scope, in the UK, there are 14.6 million people with disabilities. That's 21% of the current working population. If we use those stats as a basis, that would assume that HSBC have over 52,000 colleagues potentially with disabilities. Without accessible staff applications, that means that we could have 52,000 staff who are unable to work independently. And as humans in this digital age, we all expect a good user experience as a standard. So our ethos at HSBC is that no matter what your disability, you can use your staff systems independently. We want to be able to confidently employ a diverse workforce and not just pay lip service to our disabled colleagues.
With such a large number of staff located across more than 60 countries and territories across the globe, and with every job role potentially requiring different systems to complete their job, we knew from the start that this wasn't going to be a small project, and it was going to be an entire program of work. So we had to prioritize. The approach we took had to be very measured and pragmatic. We began looking at the bank as a whole to see if there were any digital systems that touched every single one of those 250,000 members of staff, no matter what grade they were and no matter where they were physically located, whether that was in the office or working from home. And we found three. The first was HSBC's HR platform. Whether you needed to query your pay, request holiday, or conduct appraisals for your team, you are bound to need access to the HR portal at some point in your working week. I made this a personal priority of mine as the platform contained so much personal, sensitive information, and I hated the thought of any member of staff needing to share personal information with their manager or peers just to get through a journey if it turned out that even one part of that system didn't work the way it should. The second was mandatory learning. For anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of working in financial services, regular learning is mandated by the regulators in each country to make sure that staff keep on top of changes in legislation and keep important topics such as bribery or corruption at the front of every employee's minds. Performance ratings and progression metrics are sometimes tied to the completion of these pieces of learning, so ensuring equitable access to all of our colleagues was a must. The third was the intranet. Whenever any member of staff opens their web browser, they're presented with an internal HSBC homepage packed full of useful information, as well as being the gateway to countless other systems. It was obvious that this had to go on our list as well. With these three systems firmly in our sights, we knew that we could make the biggest impact for our colleagues with disabilities in the shortest amount of time. And it took a combination of a user research program consisting solely of people with disabilities, several internal and external accessibility audits, more than I can count, and the creation and delivery of accessibility training and technical support. And it was a monumental effort in stakeholder management that involved people across the globe. It was worth it though. The hard work resulted in our colleagues with disabilities being able to make more use of these systems than ever before in an efficient and independent way. And we learned a lot from this initial piece of work. We already knew that we had bank-wide policies behind us from the work we had done previously with our customer websites and apps, but policies are not always impactful when people don't have the knowledge or education to implement what those policies asks of them, or when teams don't understand what accessibility is or why it's important. We had an entire new audience building these experiences, an audience where most were keen to learn and take advantage of our team's expertise, and others that were asking us to show them what accessibility was and why it was such an important topic. One of the learnings was that around 5% of our internal staff systems were built in-house. That meant that 95% of the conversations that we were having included vendors and SaaS distributors. Not only had we to win the hearts and minds of our staff, we had to influence the roadmaps at our technology partners and even the roadmaps and goals of our partners and their subcontractors. These types of conversations were and still are constant and are not always easy, but we found that once our goal of becoming the world's most digitally accessible bank is relayed to them in a way that resonates with their own corporate goals, we're able to reach the right outcome virtually every time. Once our hearts and minds were aligned, we were able to set to work on ensuring that everyone involved understood how to create an accessible digital experience that met the needs of our staff, as well as testing their applications for our vendors. We also provided digital accessibility training to over 2,000 people in the last 12 months alone. It didn't matter whether the attendees worked for HSBC or whether they were contractors, agencies, suppliers, or just that they'd heard about the training, they could come along. And the best part, we paid for it. Another challenge we came across was legacy systems. Although accessibility can be retrofit into desktop and web applications that are already live, it can be extremely costly and time-consuming to do so. Retrofitting can only be done when developers have full access to the code of the application in the first place, and this wasn't always the case, being as how some of these applications had existed for several years by teams that might no longer exist. With these systems, we had to take a different approach. We took the time to ensure that any accessibility issues were discovered and documented. We worked to discover workarounds and communicated them for any issues we did find. And crucially, product lifecycle roadmaps were put under scrutiny by our team, and timelines of regenerating these apps were brought forward where possible. Whenever our team has been present at the very start of a project's ideation phase, we have been able to steer the design, development, and delivery of these systems, ensuring that accessibility is key every step of the way, resulting in the best experience possible for our colleagues with disabilities. If HSBC are to continue to create products and services that represent the world's populations, it needs to have a more diverse workforce when it comes to disability, which means we can't stop here. Making sure that every job can be done by every person is a no-brainer when it comes to fulfilling our goal of becoming the world's most digital accessible bank. So Lisa, what's next?
Thanks, Ben. So as our program grows, we are taking more and more vendors along the journey with us. So this is for the first time for a lot of our vendors, the only time they've had an organization push the accessibility agenda as much as we are. So in some instances, it's been a very steep learning curve. We are actively, as Ben mentioned, influencing external product roadmaps and sharing our knowledge to start their own digital accessibility journey, which in turn will benefit other technology users outside of HSBC with the changes we are implementing. We will also continue to embed accessibility into the bank's DNA and fight the good fight to ensure we become the world's most digitally accessible bank. 2023 has a strategic focus on recruitment. As we've mentioned a couple of times, we want to ensure we are able to employ a diverse workforce. So this ties into our wider D&I agenda. Again, to ensure we can truly employ a diverse workforce, we need to make sure all of our digital applications are accessible. Whilst we've come such a long way, and we have changed a number of lives for some of our staff for better, which we are very proud of, we still have a lot more to do, and we've only just scratched the surface. We recognise that the position we are taking means that other organisations are benefiting from our push, and ultimately, this means that anyone who is neurodiverse or disabled are also benefiting from HSBC sharing their knowledge. So with that, on behalf of Ben and I, I'd like to thank you all for coming to this session, on top of also joining TechShare Pro. So please, now's the time. If you've got any questions, please just come off mute and ask any questions you have.
So we have some questions here. We'll go to the bottom. Okay, so Chamandeep asked, what training and support is available to new hires who have never been exposed to accessibility before, especially those with non-ALI roles? Shall I take this?
Yeah, go for it.
So our team has devised accessibility training targeted to each type of digital role that we've come across in the bank. So whether you are a developer or you're a tester, a QA tester, or you are a business analyst, a project manager, or product owner, you can attend one of our bespoke training courses designed specifically for that job role.
I think as well, just to add to that, Ben, our accessibility team is expanding, and the accessibility managers within our team are always there to answer questions for every project, every digital project that's going on within the bank. So yeah, there's always support coming from this team. Exactly.
Phone calls, emails, Teams messages, we're available all the time, every day. Gareth asks, what's the biggest challenge you face in getting stakeholders and product owners on board with accessibility?
So I think initially, especially on the staff side, it's knowledge and awareness, A, of what accessibility is, and B, what that means to them, especially as a product team and a delivery team, a technical team, which again plays back into the point we just mentioned around the training. We do lots of, we have lots of product owner, product management training as well that we offer. We also, just within HSBC, we socialise everything that we do. We run our yearly GAD, and we have lots and lots of content available and to share. And we've also created, or in the process of creating, our accessibility hub, which again has a font of knowledge on there around accessibility.
I think they are the only two questions that came in so far. So if anyone has any questions, please type them in the panel on the right-hand side. Kelly asks, what types of content do you have in your accessibility hub so far?
So our hub is covering the journey. It gives a story of a journey of a lady with MS and to show some of the challenges that she has. And the whole point around that is so that people can empathise and understand actually in real life what some challenges could be. And then on there, we'll be hosting some specific e-learning around accessibility also, which looks at kind of the WCAG standards, also content around PDFs. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. And
some empathy around assistive technology as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as well, I think Gareth asked the question earlier around some of the challenges we face. I think as well, assistive technology, people knowing it within the bank, what's available to them, and also within the bank, what we can provide to our staff. I think that, has been a challenge today.
Carol has asked, is this a worldwide program for staff in HSBC globally? As a very topical question, as we are currently in the United Arab Emirates visiting a conference that is being sponsored by HSBC called Access Abilities earlier this week. And we have been talking to all the local teams about how they can help their staff members with disabilities. So yes, is the short answer to that. We look at issues affecting staff in every market that we operate in or employing. Paul Smythe asks, how big is your accessibility team and what would you say your current challenges are in influencing and improving the rest of the organization? So we have 7 accessibility managers who are full-time, and then there are lots of staff around that, as well as having our global head of digital experience and accessibility. The current challenges in influencing and improving, I think a lot of them have been solved thanks to the buy-in we've had at every level of the organization, from the board at the very top of HSBC to CEOs of the individual countries' banks, and then all the way down through the management structure. And it wouldn't have been such a quick process without that level of impact that we've got across the whole company.
I'll just add on that one as well. Part of our program includes user research. So again, to influence and I guess improve areas within our kind of deliveries, we use lots of our big applications. We take through a user testing program where we talk to people and ask people with disabilities to use the applications and provide that feedback. And we have got instances where we've taken the feedback from that user research and upgraded the given product it relates to. So yeah, a lot of it comes to talking to the users, and we're seeing that more and more as this program grows.
Chamandeep asks again, what would you say are two important areas to consider when going into an organization as the only accessibility expert where interest already exists to be inclusive? That's a very good question, Chamandeep. And it's not an easy question to answer. I think what you've got a good advantage because the company has hired you as an accessibility expert, so they already must have gone through a lot of thinking before even posting that job role. So what I would look for is who was the person who sponsored that job role? What is their influence in the organization? And then what I would look for are policies that are in place in the bank, in the company, whatever company this is, and see how you can build accessibility into these policies and procedures. Carol asks, I assume language barriers can be solved by local bank staff, but does that also pose some challenges?
So yeah, I mean, we're a global team. We have teams based out in Hong Kong and the UK. We do support multi-language from a technical accessibility perspective. Does it pose some challenges? I don't think in terms of the delivery of what we're trying to deliver. I think there are some areas we need to concentrate on specifically around the scope of testing, I guess would be the answer to that question. I guess just in terms of language barriers, especially as being here in the UAE this week, if we're managing stakeholders in regional countries where English isn't their first language, for example, but is ours in the way that we explain it, being able to get the right level of empathy across about what accessibility is sometimes can be a challenge. Wouldn't say it's a blocker though, not at all. We can always find a way for that. I hope that answered your question. Good. Doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. Thank you. We can see some good feedback on the Slido. That's great. Thanks all. Okay. Brilliant. Well, I guess if there are no more questions, we'll just give it another minute. We'll hang on the line if there's any more questions that want to come through. But thank you all for joining. I hope we've answered some questions for you. And if you have any more questions for us, please reach out directly. Ben and our contact details are within Hopin, so you can see how to contact us there. Thank you.
We will hang around until the top of the hour, 1 p.m. UK time, when this session closes. So if anything else does pop into your heads, feel free to type it into Slido. We've had quite a few questions come in now. Okay, so Betty asks, what generally is provided in the trainings for different roles? That's a good question. So every one of the courses starts with the very basics about what is accessibility and why it's important. Then when we look at developer training, for example, we go in, it's a longer course and it goes into the technical detail of how to build websites and apps to a WCAG standard. For people who are in more product roles or analyst roles, we talk about defect prioritization and everything that you need to support your team in order to produce an accessible application.
Good question. I think we've got a good one here from Jessica. Do you think that the culture of accessibility awareness is very different around the world? I think that's a difficult one. I think if I was asked that question 5 years ago, I think, and from what I've seen within HSBC, I say yes. I think, especially coming here to UAE now, and with all the work that we've been doing with our Asia teams, I'd probably suggest that we don't really see much evidence of that. I think it's so close to the wider D&I agenda, which everyone is so aware of and understands. I think there's some nuances, but I wouldn't say differences necessarily.
Rob Weems asks, or just to add to that question by Jessica first, I just want to say that I think that what I've seen visiting different markets is that the culture often reflects the state of legislation and laws in that country. So countries that have more strict accessibility or wider reaching accessibility laws, you see that especially in corporate environments that's picked up in. So just to add a bit more context. But everyone is on a journey, and I think every country that I've been to and spoken to someone in understands that it is a journey and understands the importance of it. Rob asks, what do you see as the biggest challenge and biggest opportunity in 2023?
Okay, I think I would say for both the challenge and the opportunity is the growth. I think the amount of growth that we can make and the amount of growth that we plan to make, I think can be seen as a challenge and an opportunity. I'm not sure about anything particularly from an accessibility point of view. No. Thanks, Rob.
Anna asks, in terms of vendors and compliance, how do you cope with different laws and guidelines, Section 508, etc., etc.? Well, that's a very good question. Well, what we've found from every law or legislation relating to digital accessibility, they all relate to the international standard of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So when we talk to vendors and when we talk to other suppliers and contractors, we mention the latest version of these international standards that the legislation will in the future have adopted.
I think as well, more from a logistical point of view, we it's around managing how we discuss about accessibility internally and globally. So we have the same accessibility framework, the same accessibility standard. We're consistent with the messaging. So whilst there may be some nuances in laws and guidelines, what we deliver will always meet the global standard for accessibility.
Chamandeep, I've just seen your question from 6 minutes ago. I will reach out to you about the answer to that question. Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your questions, and thank you for your time in spending your time, half an hour of your day with us. We really appreciate it, and we hope you've taken something away from our session. Please reach out if there's anything that comes to mind later on.
Thank you very much.